and its competitivity in the market, both internal and as well as exportation.
Sobre ampliação.
We'll talk about broadening and growth of our productivity, as well as preparation of the market for preparation for foreign markets. We'll have important contributions here. I'll be moderating, and by my side I have the state deputy here in São Paulo, and I have Marco Fujihara, who is also our executive coordinator for the Brazilian Forum for Climatic Change. Also, we have Jacyr Costa Filho, besides being a counselor for important companies regarding agro here in the country as well as internationally. He controls agribusiness for FIESP, the biggest federation of industries, and consequently agribusinesses in the country. To my right, Arnaldo Jardim, besides being the president and coordinator for the parliamentary front for the juice energetic area in the Congress, is federal deputy, vice president of parliamentary front and agribusiness in the country, and is our coordinator for Southeast region in Brazil for this parliamentary front. And to follow up, we have Gustavo Carneiro, general director for IPA, the Pesta Agri Institute, or responsible for executive organization inside PDA. I thank everyone, and we'll jump straight into the start of this talk, acknowledging to have the presence of our Secretary for Agriculture and Supply of the state of São Paulo, Chiquinho Matorro, and to have here as well the presence of our Cesario, who is the president of Abramilho and presides the newest Council for Agro within our institutions of commerce in Brazil, which is a commercial association of São Paulo. And also the privilege of not only all the makers of this event to have here in the audience, Plinio Anastati, and getting here to be part of this crowd, our ladies in agro, the whole family that follows that up, and Meireles, who's the vice president of FIESP and president of Sebrae Council. We thank each and every one of you. Camarguinho, the commander for Macadamia, so many friends. Not without further ado, I want to leave my thank you in regards to everyone, and for those who follow us on internet, we'll be hearing Marco Fujihara, and who should be leaving his contribution in the talk at this moment. Thank you. Firstly, I would like to thank organizers of the event. Nice to talk to you about regarding regulation, especially on something as complex as climatic change. I think it would be interesting considering everybody's talking about the carbon market, and regulation seems to be the important north in the compacts when you intend to create a good market. A good market is usually a regulated market, and there's a lot of confusion nowadays when it comes to carbon markets, SEMBIOs, and how these things can be fungible, how we can have fungibility if there is such a thing. So the idea of regulating these issues seems to be absolutely necessary. We had 2 months ago the adding of a federal decree that wishes to add a few of the economic instruments inside the climate change subject, which I believe absolutely necessary, so we can end up having in the future a possible market which the carbon matter may be transactionable, and how these things can be fungible with other issues such as semi-bill and other things. I understand regulation is a specific point and an important point, and the regulation of markets is more complex than it usually is, because it goes over not only through regulation of inspection agents, CDM, and the sorts, but it also goes through the market actors, the ones that work with the market and work within this market. It's not very different from what there is in the market. Capital market is market capital is not only the way things are transacted, be them over the counter or the very stock market itself, in which by enabling transactions you issue a title or you insure a title, and but that is what will be happening in the future market of carbon. And there's a lot to be worked on top of this. So actually, public policies in Brazil, this May decree, it was a little bit delayed. It was a little bit late because the last one came 13 years prior. There was a second attempt to try and regulate that. Certainly, it would be more productive whether we had a project for law, juridic security would be more appropriate, but considering we are going through this electoral year, to be able to pass that through the Congress, a subject of such complexity, we would be wasting a lot of time in this discussion, but nothing stops us from being regulated in the next legislature, considering the parameters being established in this decree that took place in May. There are some important parameters there. The first one, for instance, it shows that the matter of carbon is a financial asset. Being a financial asset changes completely the way of thinking of many things. What is an asset? If it's an asset, it has to be embedded within the transactions, the possible transactions within a company. In agro, this is more complex because it's necessarily connected to the carbon stock in soil, the kidnapping of any agricultural activity, but the amount of carbon is contained in soil stock. For that, you have to quantify it and specify it, and there's a certain, but I understand it's believable, and it has been established as an asset, not necessarily a commodity. I believe this is a public policy that the decree has established as important. I understand this is rather interesting from a transactional standpoint possible. I'm not only considering financial operation regarding tradable and commerce. I believe there are other kinds of collateral operations. I believe there are kinds of operations in which carbon could work as an insurance for something. For instance, in Costa Rica, carbon is a guarantee for debentures for some years now. I believe we should start to think about how things can be led this way in terms of collateral here in Brazil. I think we have a long path to run, and certainly a good path. Another thing this new regulation brings forth that I believe is important is the fact of having registry logs for transactions. Why there is a custody chain for transactions, so you don't transactionate something twice. A CGP is a way in which people register their transactions, so you don't sell it twice. May it be stocks or anything of the sort. So the log of these transactions have been placed as an important part of this new regulation, which is the way these registries start to exist. The challenge here, and for a lot of people from agro, this is important, is how to get things fungible with other things. For instance, CBIL. Yeah? How can these things converse with that? CBIL is going through a critical moment. Who's been following the market knows, but I understand there has to be some kind of formalizing of this fungibility. We have not reached this stage yet, but certainly we'll get there. Another matter the decree creates, this new regulation creates, besides the matter of transaction logs, neutralization logs, and compensation logs for carbon. Besides that, it creates another important step, which is the sectorial plans for climatic change. Everybody knows, I will not retell the story to ladies and gentlemen. Everybody knows the Paris Agreement, and everybody has committed to reducing these emissions. If there is such an agreement, and diplomatically we sign this agreement, and this was referred like by the President of the Republic, it means this one is active. How can we fulfill the goals established in this accord? So it is up to the economic sectors to work their reduction goals, and this is what the decree creates, this regulation creates, including agro and other sectors will be working on their reduction curve of emissions along the time. This seems extremely important in a way to understand that everyone has commitments, which is different from the Kyoto Protocol, in which some countries had reduction and others didn't. So in the Kyoto Protocol, you would split the world in those who could reduce and the ones who couldn't. Now everybody is in the same game. Everybody has to create their emissions one way or the other. I believe these regulatory issues are absolutely necessary. It's a good thing we have the Deputy Arnaldo Jardim, who certainly be addressing these questions via law projects, and will certainly have some important issues. And I particularly understand Brazil needs to have this as soon as possible. It is necessary because we have comparative advantages that could be transformed into competitive advantages. I have worked in many years with Mr. Leo Batista, and he would tell me this every day. We have to turn comparative into competitive, and this is believable. I believe a possible regulation is necessary and enough for us to keep on with this protagonism. We are protagonists of some things, but we can be even more protagonist. I believe that we also have to have a detail. I wrote a book that is called The Value of Forests some years ago, and I would say in the introduction, Brazil is the only country that looks on the name of trees, and we have to take advantage of that because we are not taking advantage of even that. So I believe we have a good path. Regulations we need are numerous and rather important. Agro has an absolutely important role in all of them, be them as the role of protagonists. We could be good at this and that. We'll be throwing confetti on top, but we have to put our foot down on the ground and then say, let's be realistic and let's transform this into regulatory and increase our comparative advantages and end up generating competitivity. All of that to reach another subject that I will not be putting here. If we don't do it, they will be doing it on the other end. They will create carbon tax, a whole bunch of things. It's better for us to create ours. Otherwise, there will be a lot of people, Brazilian products will be taxed for certain. And the tax agro products, though our margins are small, it can be very complicated. There are some siderurgic materials that already have that with carbon taxation on European borders, so it requires again an absolutely efficient regulation and fast. Otherwise, they'll do it first. So I have my perception that we have to create this format for regulation as soon as possible. I'll be ceasing here. So there's a lot of things to talk about, and I'll leave it to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado pela importante
Thank you for the important contribution and intervention, and we'll follow up on this panel to talk about public policies that work. Example of efficient regulation, and the purpose is exactly to discuss public policy for the agribusiness and involve Arnaldo Jardim here to talk about what we must come out in front, setting the tone of what we should be seeking, And let's look at the contribution by Jacyr Costa. Thank you, Itamar. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Plínio, for the invitation. It's an honor to be participating at such an important event for agribusiness and global. I would like to take the advantage of the member and the former Secretary of Agriculture, Itamar and Arnaldo, and talk a little bit about policies that worked for us to follow good examples. The state of São Paulo, we recently had, in my opinion, two public policies adopted very important to agribusiness. First is the regulation of state of São Paulo did the regulation for it was an intense work of negotiations, rather intense, that did not meet any of the parts, did not attend any of the parts, and that's why it was good, because in this negotiation, both producers and environmentalists found everything. There was more to be done regarding each one's thesis. This ended up not happening. However, this brings environmental trait, which is important for us. Without a doubt, it places São Paulo in the vanguard of agribusiness. The state of São Paulo represents already 25% of the Brazilian agribusiness. The agri-industries and are located here for equipment. So there's a rather important trait in terms of image of agribusiness around the world. So it's a theme I find rather relevant. Another public policy adopted in the state of São Paulo, which is very much connected to something that is missing in Brazil, which is juridic safety for production, the regulation of possession of land in the portal of Paranapanema. He ended up with a discord of many years, provided important power to our producer, rural producer, who had been producing for decades and had no safety regarding possessions, and this would avoid investment by the producer. It prevented the producer from perfecting and evolving, and we're getting into a stage that it's very important. This juridic security. So this is an example by the state of São Paulo that we must be following. Another aspect, and I go back, that the modern agro, the agribusiness, is leaving in some sectors. It has already stopped being intensive in labor to be more intensive in terms of capital. And a policy adopted, which was very important, was the FIAGRO law reported by our Arnaldo Jardim, which I'm sure he'll be detailing with much more property than me. But Arnaldo is landmark, because to finance agribusiness is a need, because agribusiness is more and more intense in terms of capital, and this leads to us providing the mechanism so we can develop and the pugency it requires, and as discussed before in this forum, ensures food safety the world so much needs. This is another aspect I believe is very important. So I would like to wrap things up to mention the example of RenovaBio.
RenovaBio had an important participation of Plinio Nastrali. Back then, he was part of the board of National Energy. It was very important the presence of Minister Fernando Coelho Filho. He had a vital role. Leaderships from our sector. Back then, André was the president. Mario is substituting him. And together, we made RenovaBio bill. It was an important step. Regulation of RenovaBio for over a year with loads of work and persistency, and we implemented, and it started working in the pandemic in 2020 very successfully. In 2021, we had an entire year about RenovaBio. We had fantastic results on decarbonization and in the aspect of being an example. And Marco Fujihara quoted RenovaBio's decree that was edited by the government and its setback. And it created a relevance. It has been discussed in many forums, but it's programs like this, this quality, that must be references for our development. I know we are still missing a lot. I think Fiagro was a something to remember, but we need more. This carbon market, we must work on the advance of this regulation, because that will provide the pungency and the strength for our agribusiness. So my contribution is on that sense, and I would like to pass the floor again to our state representative, Itamar Borges. Thank you. As usual, you cover a lot. Agribusiness is for that. The presence of the players of the sector, companies, Jacyr, André, Mario, and all, Graziella, that is on a new mission now. Plinio, that is always there with friends. Plinio, you are a leader. The leadership you provide is extremely important. The speech from our federal deputy, I must highlight. Arnaldo, you have been doing a lot of work as a congressman. You are playing an important role. We have to thank Rodrigo Garcia, our Congress, and the producers, the leaders of agro that are looking for the solution, and they're now going for a new era with legal safety. And you have been contributing a lot. The floor is yours to give sequence, but I could not forget to highlight you. The floor is yours, Arnaldo. It's with great joy that I start speaking today. It's an honor to be part of this forum. We are sad because it's almost over, but we are happy for the success. The broad approach, the consistency of the debates, and of course, from the mission of ensuring legal safety and producing sustainability. This forum contributed for this debate in Brazil and in the world. The representation was voiced for this power and this responsibility. We are happy to be here. I'm privileged to be besides Jacyr Costa. He is a reference, not just by his work, but because of this trajectory. Jacyr is a practical, effective, and reflective. He always provokes. Marco Fujihara, he was extremely important for my trajectory when I was part of the sector of solid residues. Marco inspired me, he helped me, and I would like to thank you so much for that. We have an effective regulation, and that is what it provokes on the field. On August 18th, we're going to have the Clean Field Day. Brazil is a world champion of aluminum packaging. Recycle. International reference, 98%. Brazil is champion of returning sustainability regarding packages. And it's in the only sector that they are champions, it's on pesticides. I'm happy to be here also besides Gustavo, and I want to tell you that Gustavo is here replacing another friend of ours. I'm Director of Infrastructure and Logistics of FTA, and he's the Director of Instituto Pensar Agro. We are here as partners, and the Institute is supporting, and he's now Executive Director, a young, talented man that helps us a lot in Brasilia. You will hear about him a lot. I want to thank so many people present, so many, but I will highlight because they have to do with the theme. It's not just because I like them, otherwise I would have to quote all of you. I want to talk about Mário Campos and André Rocha, and I want to talk about Minélio, that represents ProBio, talks about biodiesel. Thank you so much for being here. We are talking about public policies that are efficient regarding regulation. Just to contextualize, we need regulation policies because we have a state reform ongoing. This huge state responsible for the economical production, the gigantic state, the state that was absolutely concentrating. Remember the sugar quotes from not long ago. Now they are replacing to a regulating state, not a provider, but a regulating that disciplines and establishes relationships in the society. But regulation policies were needed before. You had to negotiate with the executive. The reform of the state, where we have the legislative, we have a bigger balance, and we can have a more proactive society that demands regulation policies. And how can these policies dialogue with the agribusiness? That's our focus. Guilherme is here from UNEM, the Union of Ethanol Producers. I can just see you now. Those are all segments that talk with the policies that we will discuss, the regulation policies. Jacyr mentioned something important regarding sustainability. The primary sector has shown dynamism that other sectors don't have. It's a post-BNDES, and the agribusiness has responsibility for 30% of the financing of the sector. 12 years ago, 100 of the sector. The sector constituted new moments from the moment that barter operations, and we have many segments here, they established a partnership with the producers. After that, it extended to equipment, talking to the producer. The sector self-financed. And now with the new agribusiness law that regulated CRAS, CPRs, we had that adding to the AVAL fund, and that all allowed, if we can give sequence, Fiagro, although very young, they are now going to be inscribed on the B3. We can have it next Monday, the launch of B3 Fiagro. And we can have now over 40 Fiagros registered, handling 23 billion reais in investments. Think about the transformation potential. End quotes. We have 53,000 Brazilians that bought quotes from Fiagros. It's the money that arrives and where they're putting it as well. People investing in the sector that improves the dialogue with the urban sector, because many times they do not know the sector. So we have an example of a good example of regulation where the sector goes for alternatives of financing. Now, moving on to logistics and infrastructure. A competitive sector from door in needs to have regulation policies helping to provide an efficient infrastructure. We are talking about crop flow, and we are talking about the sector. The parliament, we can say, had a good homework on this recent past. We regulated MAR-BR, all the coast ship handling, all the railroads, and that's important potential regarding investment. And we deepened the PPPs. Local experiences, the proactive solutions with the state. And here in São Paulo, we have discussed partnerships as well. Those quotes added important value for the experience. Jacyr was involved in the ethanol agreement, but the word is stop leaving it to the states and strengthen partnerships. That's a motto that we should have for regulations policies. We want to talk about regulation. This was mentioned by Jacyr and Pra. Unfolding of the forest codes. This is a contract to say that we would pay installment for part of the properties with this environmental commitment of a percentage that is from 20 to 80% in the Amazon biomas. And that has to do with private properties. The sector was able to do that for our joy. Fortunately, we have to celebrate that the sector paid that fee. The sectors of, for example, of sugarcane in São Paulo, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have about 300 harvesters, about 1.5 million. I was going to say 1.5 million. 2 to 3.5. Let's say 2. Only in mechanics and investment that this sector paid 6 billion reais. If you're happy, this was something that was paid. Productivity was almost 3 digits. It fell to 78 tons by hectares. It was bigger even than the investment. The sector is paying the price. A lot of times we are not being able to say that to the reality. We have a plan of low carbon agriculture that's being implemented. I congratulate Itamar, the state representative Rodrigo Garcia, that is doing that in a significant way. And just not to go over time, I want to talk about something that is important. And I want to mention a player that we are very proud of, the father of Renova Bio, Plinio. We are proud to have Evandro here in a mobilization that all the entities I mentioned, we had an approval. The recognition of biofuels. The green economy, the low carbon, and the architecture of Renova Bio. I'm here just, preaching inside the church, but some people are out of our bubble, and this will be here for people to reflect upon. When you create an indicator, and on that, we take into consideration the practice, you take into consideration the capacity you have to deliver your product, you put pressure about the efficacy of the system. We know that law will unfold. But what are the ICBOs?
and with great pride and the support of the segments have been performing this function. And there's another front that I mentioned. Marco Fujihara knows of this, and I got help, and I'm the coordinator of the front. I'll be saying the full name and nickname, the Parliamentary Front for the Implementation of Economic Instruments for Environmental Preservation. The front, who did I inherit it from? From our dear Menchistami, who created it. And after succeeded by great tributaries, then I provided continuity to it. And this front studies matters of green tributation. How do we incorporate external factors in decision making? How do public policies incorporate these concepts in order to choose not only based on the cost sheet, but based on a more abridged vision of the segment? So this is constituted in the front, and in this front we have been running a comparative analysis, as Fujihara says it, competitive advantage for our C-bill, yeah? If there's another one, please let me know. But there are many green currencies being implemented around the world. We have recyclable credit. There's a decree regulating this, reverse logistics regarding recyclable materials, and CBU is the most elaborated and sophisticated green currency we have ongoing. We have to make it available around the world instead of teaching us morals and lessons to get CBUs to make the decarbonization process to be present. It was said by Toyota, Volkswagen in the previous round. This is what motivated me to be a member of the amendment, the C20 route, to provide it from IPI, able to provide IPI to vehicles. Regarding the wheel is the most improved matter for environment. I'm a great supporter of the Renova Bill. I support this movement to say that the dialogue, especially with the entities we have not been enjoying, which are considered threats to the biofuel, the biodiesel sector, does not celebrate that in any way. What happened? We had a reduction of B13 to B10. The sector paid a price because of this. The allegation of reduction of mixture that could generate a economical gain was never proved to be true. And there was a desarticulation of the sector. We're supposed to go to B14, as Senator Rocha said. Had we had the B14 ongoing, would have an emission of CBILs much bigger. And maybe CBIL would not have reached the price the government said it was harmful of 200 reais, as it was a relationship of offer and demand. If you widen the offer, you'll have a higher price. We are getting a decree issued by the government that sustains some laws by Renova Bill, and we've been following that with Dr. Plinio, our friend Plinio at CNPE, when we, 2 years prior to the pandemic, discussed the revision that was done for goals for the Renova Bill and all biofuels, and we want that this sign of questioning. We are I'll be finishing in the exact time. So to be understood as an invitation to dialogue so we can discuss goals for next year. We understand the government has been suffering pressure. Me as a parliamentary have been discussing to reduce ICMS for fuel. That's why we battled for the PAC-PIS and to reestablish competitivity for ethanol. That's why I voted for PAC for the trucker aid. And anything we can do to fight the crisis, we're willing to do so. But to wrap up, I say, when we debate regulation policies, there is a very expensive theme, okay? Jacyr called legal safety. I call it legal safety that ensures continuity. it is worth being agreed upon, but it may not bring rules that can harm the credibility of the program. It's no good. You have no conditions to introduce this to the world, that which are our attributes. So my invitation is to dialogue, to preserve the policies for biofuel, so we may consolidate this extraordinary experience. Sibil, Renovabil, and Brazil may be at the vanguard of the green economy. Congratulations, Arnaldo. Thank you. This initiative and coordination of the time, together with the remaining organizers of this forum, not only the ones present, but the ones following from around the world, to get to know public policies such as this, that places the business environment, exportation, and legal safety as important matters, from climate issues brought on by Marco, those abringent approaches by Jacyr and Arnaldo that left here, not only the legislative matters that have advanced and others that have been straightening the sector. And to complete these important contributions, let's hear Gustavo Carneiro from IPA, Instituto Pensar Agro. Thank you, Itamar and Gafi, for the invitation, the Institute, for us to have the opportunity to be able to talk a little bit about, on behalf of President Nilson, who could not be here. I think it's important for those who don't know, explain a little bit what the Institute is, provide you with a little bit of background on how we work and what we do. The Institute is an association of entities, meaning it may not be associated to companies and people, with the goal of having the technical and operational subsidized for the cooperation. We have a body of 32 employees that support the parliamentaries, and are formed by 48 associations, which of my friends are here with me today, and they have all been mentioned. And we do this work. We've been doing this work since 2013, when the Institute was created, by saying that as our day-to-day is to deal with public policies. I could not forget to mention that one of the most important matters for Brazil as a country that sets itself apart from the world when it comes to international trade is that we have a very differentiated agriculture. We have a tropical agriculture, and I think Brazil is one of the only countries amongst the main economical players around the world that have a tropical agricultural model, and this provides many challenges that us as a sector must address, not only with public policies, but image. As Jacyr said, it's very important, as it is a constant challenge for you to address this so-called AGC, unlike many parts of the world that covers the ASG matter. I'll provide some examples of some policies addressing this topic to exemplify these challenges we have around the world when it comes to tropical agriculture, and be able to explain not only to the Brazilian that is a constant challenge, but to the world what this differential is. And I have sorted some examples, and I'll start with the letter A, or letter E, which is environment, which is vastly talked about by everyone. Is the forest code that is a landmark. I think very few people know we're going through a transition of our political model, in which we see a transformation, or almost a transference of the executive power to legislative power. And I think the Forest Code was the great beginning for it all. The Forest Code was the first great law approved in National Congress, that came from the Congress itself, not from a provisional measure. It had a qualified quorum. It could be an amendment, but it was not a great law, and it's rather very much questioned because it does not understand the Brazilian productive model. So it brings me like some kind of hot heat for our topic. It's a public policy that it ran an X-ray of the Brazilian reality. We can have the least bit of traceability of what property is. Of course, it's the declaratory. It depends on the regulation that has been applied on many states. It came into fruition legally starting in 2018 by pressure, and I believe it's an efficient policy for the environment. Another that is very much forgotten and key that is still being discussed, not approved yet, is our model for environmental licensing. Our constitution preaches that any activity that is potentially polluting or degrading to the environment, it needs authorization from the public power to work, and we have no regulation regarding this theme as of yet. All the norms come from has no safety that any other law has. Any rural property above 1,000 hectares are still insecure to be questioned by not having the license. For example, the environmental secretary of Bahia, one of the creators of the famous LAC, the license for addition and commitment. Everybody knows the impact that activity will be providing, and you commit to those conditions. The environmental body, the competent one, stipulates, and this is the secretary then invented this model to disobstruct the bureaucracy for the paper analysis and unnecessary most times for the environmental impact. And this secretary informed us that if they stop receiving requests for licenses, so if they stop receiving new requests, it would take 25 years to analyze all the pending requests. So it's a legislation under discussion. It's been approved in the chamber and in the Senate. It's very important to address the environment. Now, when it comes to governance, I think a revolution that has been talked about by you, it was Fiagro, not only because it brings the market capital close to livestock, but it brings professionalization to agriculture, meaning you bring to the managers, the managers of funds, the responsibility of analysis, but not only governance of the property itself. For it to be inserted inside Viagro, they must meet these criteria that are globally demanded, required, and you make way to any physical person to be a producer or a landowner through the Viagros. So it's a revolution in the area of governance, and I believe that the widening of the scope of PDR with the inclusion of Agro 2 law by Pedro Pion is also a revolution. If we observe the amount of resources these new instruments is repressed demand that nobody had any idea was taking place. Without governance, this won't go through. The money will not reach the other end, and we have been noticing that less and less the Brazilian government has been having conditions or subsidize the creators. So due to these hard realities, we must address these policies, and this is a great competitional advantage, and this is the discourse compared to the world. We are far behind, and we must advertise that and start translating what the livestock and agricultural scenario is in Brazil. Regarding the social aspects, I believe that all actions commented here address a very important matter, which is production costs. The lesser the cost, the more you can produce with less fixed costs, and we know very well the curve of offer and demand. The bigger the offer, the lesser the price. And when it comes to product, with the global crisis we've been having, I believe all these actions come towards that line of thought and access to food. We usually say that in our internal debates that the ministry and the public power must look upon agriculture from a different angle. We talk usually what happens is the rural producer, the one who contributes for that to happen, is the taxpayer. So deep down, the ministry is there to serve the citizen, the food, not the production itself. That's just the means. If we start having a discussion regarding food, I believe we'll have many challenges, and this address most of them, but a different model to sell what is done, not only by the parliamentaries, but the agribusiness as a whole. I believe this is a matter that addresses social aspects and many others. We had great debates, and I think great flags of the parliamentary front for agribusiness addressed one way or another the social issues. There's the matter of the discussion of landholding regulation. There was a record level lately. So it deals with the social aspect. We put these people out in the market and provide them conditions to be producing and work. And this also addresses the social matters. I could go on for hours mentioning social examples, which were rather polemic and rather important for our discussion. The rural food, which seemed to be only another tax, but it's a way to subsidize the rural retirement for the worker. These are some of the themes that have been worked on. I wanna leave here a final message, so we have time for a debate. Many of the times in this past 10 years, I feel honored to be with all these mentors regarding the work that's been done there. One thing I've been observing is that most times regulation and approval of a law is not the end. Only the parliament having a discussion, we have wonderful results, and I have some examples. The indigenous, very polemic talk, it's not only a discussion about indigenous matters, it's a question of property owning. When it started this discussion, the markings were almost daily. The more you discuss, the more they advance, the lesser are the marking of areas of conflict in indigenous areas. They focus on areas with no conflict or no disrespect to the right for property for those who have official titles provided by the state. And it's a rather big injustice that is created. Another good example that addresses the matter of this tropical agriculture that needs a different technological package, different from the world, especially regarding the use of chemicals such as pesticides. And so the law project that discusses a new regulation for registration of agro livestock products in Brazil. I know that this is being used as a non-tariff barrier for our products around the world. It's another example of public policy that's being discussed and has been generating effects even without approval. There was a record of approval of new molecules, and I believe this is a direct reflex of this discussion the Parliament has been holding on top of this theme. So I believe this is a final message, a reflection. We have to take more advantage of this protagonism the legislative has been bringing towards itself, with greater protagonism by the Chamber and the Senate committees, and this will be important for our reflection towards the future, the next presidents, of what the role of the next president will be in this new conjuncture, and as the livestock agribusiness has to organize themselves inside the ESG agenda upon the world, and how the parliament, our constitutional parliamentary system, sees this discussions to resolve these problems that which most times have no regulation, so to speak. This is the message. I thank you once again for the opportunity.
Gustavo. Nosso Instituto Pensar Agrícola, agro sempre contribuindo.
Our institute is always contributing. The panel Plinio has the contribution of our agriculture secretary. He added with some info about the sugarcane harvesters, 9,000 only in São Paulo and 12,000 in Brazil total. But talking about pungency, this is one of the biggest encounters in Brazil. It is from cattle, farmers, Abra Frutas, ABPA, Data Agro, our strategical intelligence of the sector. They're definitely leaders of the sector, and they deserve the strategy. They are leaderships. They are leaders, and we own a lot of the intelligence of Data Agro. On the Energy Forum, we have Maisal, the Rural Society of Brazil, our president Teca, incorporating with us, UNEM, the Union of the Ethanol Producers from Corn. And we have some time before we conclude if we have any questions. And if we don't have any intervention, we can have 2 minutes for conclusion. Do we have any questions from our participants? If somebody wants to ask a question, you can do. Otherwise, we're going to have final thoughts. I was thinking about 2 things. The ESG, that's a way of allocating capital. I'm an investment manager, and the cover of the column this week said there's no ESG, there is only E. And on E, we have climate change. The column is saying that, and I think they have a lot of influence in the world. They are the most important magazine. I must agree. If we don't have a country, we cannot have ESG, and a contribution that we need to have. And E is important not just as a non-tariff barrier, but to explore our advantages. We have many advantages in agro, and we have metrics. I'll give you an example. We finished a work where we had to create algorithm. Where is that being done? I just gave a lecture about carbon in the soil and about the need to make things more pragmatic. So I must agree with the columnist. ESG is just E. And we must focus if we want to take competitive advantage on that. I don't see people in Brazil looking into that as an economical advantage. And the challenge, Arnaldo, I can launch this challenge, is to put together this with carbon credits. I'm asking because I don't know. We should sit together and study, because then I will transform something that is Brazilian in an international title. That is my challenge for you, and we should think about it. Thank you, Marco. Let's go to our closing thoughts. Guys, I've talked about programs that have been implemented. I want to talk about things that are important in the agribusiness and something that's priority at FIESP, which is the National Plan of Fertilizers. Because of many unions' requests, we have a working group at FIESP, and we are advancing together with the Secretary of Strategical Subjects of the presidency. We're going to have a meeting on Friday, and I want to thank Francisco Maturro because this integration of the National Plan of Fertilizers is extremely important. We are doing an amazing work with Rio de Janeiro, Sergipe, and Minas, and we want to engage São Paulo in this project. Francisco Maturro is sending the subsecretary to represent him, and Itamar will probably need the Congress of São Paulo, and Del Grande, who is the coordinator of our forum, will be there. And I know you are campaigning for state representative. And it's a shame you're not going to be there, but Edvaldo will invite you to engage in this project. And of course, the priority for agribusiness is to re-elect you. Go campaign. Get re-elected. We are going to need you in Congress. Continue leading the front and the business. It's a shame that Brazil imports 97% of potassium chloride. How can you project a growth of 3-4% a year with this dependence? So many unions. We have 9 unions inside FIESP. We are in this working group, and I'm going to ask you for your support in Congress for this project. And we are going to continue this project. Thank you. Thank you, Jacyr. Regarding the Federal Congress, we will all be involved in a re-election so he can represent us. Let's hear from Arnaldo. Thank you. I added comments regarding aspects that Jacyr showed. I want to thank Mike Fujihara. You have used the word. I want to thank you. The view that Gustavo showed was important in this last aspect, is that when we promote the debate, we make the society more sensible, and even though we don't have the immediate results of a bill, you can repact conducts and redefine behaviors. This is something important, and we have tasks for Itamar and Francisco. We have important debates for the National Plan of Fertilizers. I want to congratulate you for the initiative on Friday. And we're going to be on that. This is a strategic decision for the sector. We want things to work on. Mark Fujihara also provided services. I want to deal with this challenge of regulation of credit and carbon market that is so important. Establishing premises without ignoring things that are important, like the sea bios. And we are talking about how can they interact with this new concept. This is extremely relevant. You will definitely help us, and we will take that into consideration as well.
Nós temos no plano.
We have the plan of regulation of infrastructure and logistics. We have the care for the public-private partnerships milestone. We've talked about that. The pesticides bill, Graziella was saluted, Graziella from Singenta. And we have to face this debate with society. The bill that's going to be approved in the chamber and it's being debated in the Senate regarding agriculture. They are now waiting for the deliberation in the Senate. It's a safety bill for the quality of the food. We are establishing procedures of simplification so that new molecules that are not so impactful, friendlier to the environment, can be in there. We must win this conversation. Finishing with an observation, stability, we need stability. If we are here today on this panel discussing public policies and examples that must be highlighted, what makes the policies be regulated is previsibility. We must be recognized and respected. Rules are stable so that people want to invest and want to get organized and thrive. So that can prevail. Thank you very much, everyone, for the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you, Arnaldo. Gustavo, you are the last one. I was quoted. I have to answer Marco. My analogy is ESG, but I think governance is in the center of everything and the definition of responsibility. But the environmental issue needs a balance. Let me explain. A sentence that I heard a lot in college was that a producer that owns money will not think about sustainability. We have to think about that, and we need to address what's being commented. And I want to talk about the civil society that we are, to understand the protagonism and defining the agendas and the road of the country and the practical issues that we need to participate. And I think the Institute is a good instrument for the sector to act in Congress. So I'm here and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our time is over. Everybody's very disciplined. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. Thank you, everyone listening. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to every one of you.